What if Prometheus was more of a direct prequel to Alien? Well, originally it was, and it would have taken place on the exact same moon where the first film occurs, complete with eggs, facehuggers, and xenomorphs. Not only that, but it would have been called Alien Engineers. So to find out how we went from that to the divisive final film we got, let's dive in and take a look at what could have been Prometheus. In late 2009, Jon Spaihts was still an up-and-coming screenwriter, but was getting attention in Hollywood for his then unproduced script Passengers. During a general meeting with Ridley Scott, the director casually mentioned that he was considering making a prequel to Alien, and wondered if Spaihts had any ideas. Caught off guard, but quick on his feet, Spaihts launched into an impromptu pitch. He began sketching out a mythology that could serve as a bridge between the Alien saga and humanity's own story. Later, he would explain his thinking. How do you make anyone care about the mysteries in Alien, like the space jockey or the origins of the xenomorphs? The only way is if the story is somehow ours, deeply enmeshed with the story of humanity. It has to touch things of such significance that we think differently about our own lives, our past, and our future. Ridley was struck by Spaihts' grand vision and made the decision to hire him to write the prequel script. Titled Alien Engineers, Spaihts' script, while similar to the final film, contained several major differences and was much more of a direct prequel to Alien, hence the title. So what would his film have been about? The film opens on ancient Earth, where three engineers perform a ritual. One consumes a ceremonial piece of cake that dissolves into a swarm of scarab-like insects. As they devour him, his DNA is broken down and released. From a nearby mountain, a primitive human woman watches the other engineers depart aboard their ship. One scarab lands on her neck, biting into her skin and infusing her with the engineer's genetic code. We then would cut to the near future. Dr. Shaw, here named Jocelyn Watts, and her partner, Professor Holloway, are excavating the ocean floor in submersibles when they discover a massive obelisk covered in alien inscriptions. Back aboard their surface vessel, they study the inscriptions and uncover a set of stellar coordinates. They bring their findings to Peter Weyland, who's aboard a Weyland Industries space station orbiting Earth. Weyland agrees to fund the expedition, but with a condition. Shaw and Holloway will earn the scientific credit. Yet any alien technology they uncover will belong to Weyland. His reasoning is personal. His attempts to terraform Mars have failed, and he craves technology capable of what he calls God's first step, creating the heavens and the Earth. The expedition sets off aboard the Magellan, joined by the android David. Their journey leads them to LV-426, the same moon from Alien, where they discover 24 pyramids scattered across the moon's equator. The team realizes these aren't tombs or temples, but terraforming machines. Ancient human civilizations, they conclude, built pyramids in imitation of their gods. However, here, the engineers are not humanity's creators, but rather influencers, beings who altered DNA and reshaped Earth's climate to make it more habitable. Inside one of the pyramids, the crew finds strange machinery alongside the eviscerated corpses of engineers, whose chests are ripped open as if something had burst from within. A storm forces the crew to retreat back to the Magellan, but in the chaos to escape, two members are left behind, just like in the final film. When an alien centipede attacks, it pierces the helmet of one of them and kills him, while the other is swarmed by a bunch of scarab-like insects. The next morning, a group of mercenaries hidden aboard the Magellan awaken and seize control of the mission. The new team returns to the pyramids, seeking to uncover the alien technology that will help Weyland terraform Mars. Shaw and Holloway discover more corpses with burst chests, but tragedy strikes when Holloway falls down a shaft and is attacked by a facehugger. Later, after being rescued, he and Shaw have sex, only for a xenomorph to erupt from his chest mid-act, killing him instantly and escaping into the ship's ventilation system. Shaw then returns to the pyramid and discovers David in an underground ship belonging to the engineers. He reveals that the ship was bound for Earth, carrying weaponized versions of the xenomorphs to wipe out humanity, but the xenomorphs turned on their masters, annihilating the crew. David then takes Shaw into a chamber filled with eggs, allowing a facehugger to subdue her. She later awakens and narrowly escapes to the Magellan, where she performs a gruesome self-surgery in a med pod to remove the gestating xenomorph inside of her, similar to the final film. Meanwhile, the other xenomorph, who's loose on the ship, has now matured and is slaughtering crew members. Jennick, the ship's pilot, proposes the most logical course of action: return to orbit, flush the creature into space, and head back to Earth. It's a sharp contrast to the foolish decisions made by the crew in the final film. Shaw tells the surviving crew of David's true agenda. He intends to complete the engineer's mission. With no other option, the survivors decide to confront David aboard the engineer's ship, while Jennick remains behind to repair the Magellan, which has been sabotaged by David. Aboard the engineer's ship, the crew and mercenaries clash with David, David, as he awakens an engineer from hypersleep. Unlike in the finished film, Weyland is absent from this mission entirely. The revived engineer promptly beheads David and massacres nearly everyone on board, while the guy infected by the scarabs returns and kills anyone trying to escape. Shaw is the only one who survives, and makes it back to the Magellan, killing the xenomorph just as it corners Janek. Together, they watch the engineer ship depart for Earth and set off in pursuit, but are unable to catch up with the much faster engineer vessel. However, the engineer pilot is suddenly killed when a chest burster erupts from his body, giving Janek the chance to ram the Magellan into it, destroying both vessels and sacrificing himself, while Shaw ejects in an escape pod, only to face one final terror on the surface amongst the wreckage, an ultramorph, spawned from the engineer pilot. After a brutal fight, she kills the beast with a circular saw. In the aftermath, Shaw receives a chilling transmission from David's severed head. The engineers he warns will come looking. As Shaw contemplates her next move, beacons on the pyramids ignite, broadcasting a distress signal into space, which the crew in the first Alien film eventually respond to. So what went wrong? After the script was finished, Ridley sought a second opinion and showed it to writer Damon Lindelof, co-creator of Lost and writer of Cowboys and Aliens. While Lindelof liked the story, he disliked that it was a direct prequel to Alien, as he'd go on to say, if the ending to Prometheus is just going to be the room that John Hurt walks into that's full of eggs in Alien, there's nothing interesting in that, because we know where it's going to end. Good stories, you don't know where they're going to end, and a true prequel should essentially precede the events of the original film, but be about something entirely different. As a result, Lindelof suggested that Prometheus be designed to run parallel to the Alien series, rather than directly into it, and that any continuation would be Prometheus 2, not Alien, which is why the finished film takes place on a different world than the one seen in Alien. Lindelof also wanted to strip away many of the familiar Alien tropes, like the facehuggers, and instead drew inspiration from another Ridley Scott classic, Blade Runner. That influence came through in the film's focus on creation, identity, and the blurred line between human and machine. Central to this was the father-son dynamic between Peter Weyland and his son, the android David. Weyland sought to play God, while David, created in humanity's image but denied its soul, grappled with what it meant to exist without true humanity. To contrast this, in Lindelof's version, the engineers are depicted as gods, the true creators of humanity, who they now seek to destroy, afraid of what humanity is capable of. This dynamic reframed the story less as a monster movie and more on the dangerous hubris of trying to manufacture life. However, Ridley's original idea for why the engineers wanted to wipe out humanity was even more controversial. Originally, the idea was that Jesus Christ was an engineer sent to Earth to guide humanity toward greater knowledge and understanding after we grew arrogant, greedy, and violent, waging wars and lusting for power. But when mankind crucified him, killing the very being who came to save them, the engineers decided humanity was beyond redemption and chose to wipe us out. Not only was the Jesus as engineer concept abandoned as Ridley felt it was too on the nose, but even the pivotal scene where the crew awakens the engineer was heavily cut down to heighten ambiguity. In the original version, Weyland, speaking through David as translator, actually holds a conversation with the engineer. When David explains that Weyland seeks immortality, the engineer asks why. Weyland replies that just as he created David in his own image to be flawless and unfailing, he too deserves the same gift. He insists that he and the engineers are both creators, both gods, and that God should never die. Disgusted by Weyland's arrogance and selfishness, the engineer tears David's head from his body and then beats Weyland to death with it. When Prometheus finally hit theaters, the reception was sharply divided. Many felt the film strayed too far from the DNA of the Alien franchise, with fans longing for a straightforward prequel filled with xenomorphs and claustrophobic terror, but instead they got a film more interested in tackling existential questions about humanity's origins. The disconnect was made worse by characters who often acted without common sense, a flaw that drew heavy criticism and stood in stark contrast to the tighter, more logical decisions written into the original draft of the script. The studio too was left disappointed. While Prometheus was a financial success, it failed to meet the box office expectations attached to a film carrying the Alien legacy. Worse, its creative choices sparked backlash. Chief among them was the revelation that the xenomorphs were creations of the engineers. For many, this undermined one of the most haunting aspects of the original films, the terrifying suggestion that the galaxy was teeming with unknowable horrors. By reframing the xenomorphs as the byproduct of bioengineering, the mystery was removed. The universe felt smaller, and their impact was diminished. Meanwhile, plans for a sequel were already in motion. Lindelof met with Ridley to discuss directions for the next installment, but he ultimately stepped away, tied up with other projects. At the same time, studio executives, disappointed with how far Prometheus had drifted from the familiar Alien formula under Lindelof's influence, made it clear they wanted any follow-up to steer the series back towards its roots: more scares, more xenomorphs, and less philosophical ambiguity. The result would be Alien Covenant. Prometheus remains a polarizing film, ambitious in scope, but divisive in execution, caught between Ridley Scott's grand ideas about creation and the expectations of being an Alien prequel. More than a decade later, it still sparks debate over whether it expanded the franchise's mythology or stripped away the mystery that made the first film so terrifying. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of Hollywood's untold stories and unmade movies.